Have you ever felt like something was watching you at night? Not from your window, but from within the room? Not a ghost, not a demon, not even an alien. Something far worse, something that grins. They call him the Grinning Man, a name that sounds almost laughable until you hear what he does. He's not bound to folklore. He doesn't belong to one culture. He's been seen across the world in different decades by people with no connection to each other. Yet somehow, they all describe the same thing. A tall man, over 7 feet, hairless, beady, wide-set eyes, a tight, metallic-looking one-piece suit, and a grin. A grin so wide, so unnatural, that witnesses say it doesn't just chill their spine, it freezes their soul. Unlike other entities, Bigfoot, Slender Man, Mothman, the Grinning Man doesn't just lurk in forests or haunt highways. He shows up where you sleep. He stands at the foot of your bed watching silently. Sometimes he speaks. Sometimes he doesn't have to. Because the message is already clear. I see you. Who is he? Some say he's an alien. Others believe he's a government experiment gone rogue. A cryptid. A visitor from another dimension. Or maybe he's something worse. A being that reflects our own darkest fears. A manifestation of dread. The first known appearance was in 1966. 2 boys in New Jersey, then a man named Woodrow Derenberger, who claimed the Grinning Man wasn't just a figure. He had a name, Indrid Cold. He spoke, he smiled, and he promised he'd return. But the question isn't whether he's real. It's something much deeper, more disturbing. If so many people from so many places have seen him, why hasn't he made himself known? To you. You're about to enter the shadowy world of the Grinning Man. But beware, once you learn about him, he might just show up. At first glance, the Grinning Man doesn't seem like the kind of entity that should paralyze you with fear. He's not grotesque. He doesn't have claws or glowing red eyes. He doesn't howl or leave trails of blood. But that's precisely what makes him so terrifying. Witnesses say he stands at least 7 feet tall, towering and broad-shouldered like a soldier built for war. But that's not what unsettles them. They say it's his face, a face that feels wrong. Office unnatural. His eyes are small and beady, spaced just a little too far apart, set into a pale, smooth face completely devoid of hair. No eyebrows, no eyelashes, no beard. Almost like a mannequin brought to life. And yet, he watches you, unblinking, unmoving, as if he doesn't breathe, as if he doesn't need to. And then, there's the smile, the thing that gives him his name, a wide, inhuman grin, a mouth that stretches just a little too far across his face. It's not joyful, it's not even cruel. It's empty, emotionless, a calculated grin, fixed in place like a mask, frozen in time. Eyewitnesses often say the same thing. His mouth smiled, but his eyes did not. That contradiction between warmth and coldness, amusement and menace, is what breaks people. Because it's a smile that pretends to be human, but clearly isn't. Some say his suit is made of a shiny tinfoil-like material, reflective, tight-fitting, seamless, like something not made on Earth. Others describe him as wearing different colors, green, blue, but always the same eerie uniform, like it belongs to no military on this planet. But it's not just what people see that disturbs them, it's what they feel, a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. Like their body knows something their mind can't process, like they're looking into the face of death itself. People who've encountered the Grinning Man often say time felt frozen. The air turned thick, and a voice in their head whispered, "Run!" But most don't. They freeze. Because something about him makes you feel like, if you move, he'll move too. It was October 11th, 1966, a quiet night in Elizabeth, New Jersey. But for 2 young boys, Martin Munoz and James Yanchidis, it would become a memory that would haunt them forever. At around 9:45 p.m., the boys were walking home from a movie theater. They took a route that led them underneath the elevated New Jersey Turnpike, a dark stretch of road lined by chain-link fences and steep embankments, the only light coming from sporadic street lamps above. Earlier that day, there had been rumors. A woman in town had reportedly been chased by a huge man in a green suit. Urban legend? A joke? The boys didn't think much of it until they reached that tunnel. As they walked, the muffled sound of traffic thundered overhead. Shadows flickered, stretched by distant headlights. The atmosphere was thick with unease. Then James stopped. He nudged Martin and whispered, "Who's that?" On the opposite side of the fence, a figure stood motionless in the bushes. At first, it was hard to see, but as the boys focused, they saw it. He was huge, easily over 7 feet tall, with an unnatural stillness. He wore a green, reflective, skin-tight suit that shimmered under the sparse light. His attention was not on them. He was staring intensely at a house across the street, about 200 meters away. Then, he turned. The boys later described him as the weirdest-looking guy we've ever seen. His face didn't even look human. No expression, no emotion, just a wide, fixed grin. Panic surged. They turned and ran without looking back, the sound of their own footsteps echoing like a heartbeat through the tunnel. They didn't stop until they were far away from that place, but the memory stayed. Soon after, famous ufologist John Keel arrived in the area. He was investigating a UFO sighting that had occurred 40 miles north that same night. When he heard of the boys' experience, he interviewed them separately. Both gave identical descriptions. Both pointed to the exact same location, and both confirmed one chilling detail. The being had not only watched the house, he had watched them too, and that was just the beginning. Less than 3 weeks after the New Jersey encounter, the Grinning Man struck again, this time 500 miles away in West Virginia. It was the night of November 2nd, 1966. Woodrow Derenberger, a sewing machine salesman, was driving home along Interstate 77. The road was quiet, the sky clear. But that peace was shattered when a glowing object dropped from the sky, landing directly in front of his car, forcing him to a halt. What happened next defied explanation. A tall being emerged from the craft. He was wearing a blue reflective one-piece suit, similar in material to the green one seen by the boys in New Jersey. But what caught Derenberger's attention wasn't the suit, it was the grin. A wide, unsettling smile stretched across the stranger's face, unnatural and fixed. But unlike the silent figure from Elizabeth, this one spoke. Or rather, he communicated telepathically. He introduced himself as Indrid Cold, and he had questions. He asked Derenberger about the strange lights in the distance, not realizing they were just the lights of a nearby town. He asked about the people who lived nearby, about the environment, the land, the society. Then just as suddenly, he thanked Derenberger, smiled once more, and returned to his ship. But before leaving, he delivered one last message. "We will see each other again." And they did. Derenberger would later claim he had multiple encounters with Indrid Cold, and even 2 other beings, also grinning men, named Demo Hassan and Carl Ardo. His wife would testify that she met them too, and that they radiated something deeply malevolent. But there's another twist. Just 2 weeks after this encounter, the Mothman was first sighted in Point Pleasant, a town not far from Derenberger's location. Was it coincidence? Or was Indrid Cold a harbinger of something darker? Some believe Derenberger was just a delusional man, but others, they think he met something not of this world, and that something is still watching us. As the Mothman sightings escalated in Point Pleasant, another family in the same region was fighting a battle of their own, not with a creature of the skies, but with something inside their home. The Lilly family lived on the outskirts of town, ordinary people. But in late 1966, their home became the epicenter of something unnatural. It started small. Objects moved. Shelves emptied themselves. Doors slammed shut without wind. They heard footsteps at night, and lights flickered without explanation. Then came the skylights, glowing orbs hovering over their roof. At first, they suspected a prank, but the events kept escalating, and then their daughter Linda saw him. It was 1:45 a.m., December 14th, 1966. Linda awoke to a strange clicking sound. She opened her eyes and froze. Standing at the foot of her bed was a man, very tall, very still, and grinning. "He walked around the bed," she said, "and stood right over me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew he was smiling. Terrified, she dove under the covers. When she peeked again, he was gone, but the damage was done. She refused to sleep in her room for weeks. Her parents didn't blame her, because from that night on, the poltergeist activity vanished. No more footsteps, no more flickering lights, no more clicking. It was as if whatever had entered their home had left with the Grinning Man. But why Linda? Why that night? And why did the Grinning Man always appear near UFO sightings, poltergeist events, or other paranormal chaos? Coincidence? Or part of his plan? It wasn't just America. Across the ocean, in a quiet village in Scotland, Mary Elizabeth McCrae would face something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The year was 1972. Mary and her husband Alan lived in peaceful isolation on the outskirts of Dunkeld, near the edge of the Cairngorms National Park. Their children had grown and left. Their house was remote, the nearest neighbor over a mile away. It was calm, safe, predictable. But on the night of November 23rd, that peace shattered. Like any other night, they went to bed around 9 p.m. They read, talked, and turned off the lights. Sometime in the early hours, Mary awoke to a clicking sound, a soft, mechanical rhythm that pulsed through the room. When she tried to move, she couldn't. She was paralyzed, lying face down. She couldn't speak, couldn't scream. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but then she noticed something that jolted her with terror. The curtains were open. She always closed them, every night, without fail. But now the moonlight was flooding in, and in the bottom left pane of the window, she saw a face with beady black eyes, and that same wide, frozen grin. Mary was transfixed. She couldn't move. She couldn't even look away. And then she began to float. Her body slowly lifted off the bed, moving toward the window. In her mind, she was screaming, but no sound came out. She was powerless, gliding toward the grinning stranger on the other side of the glass. Then, blackness. She woke the next morning in her bed, dizzy, confused, with a terrible headache that lingered for a full week. And when she looked to the window, the curtains were still open. Many dismissed it as sleep paralysis, but Mary knew better. She had never experienced it before, and never again. She kept that story to herself for decades, only telling close family. But until her death in 2013, at the age of 94, she never once changed a single detail. That same grinning face, that same clicking sound, that same feeling of being watched. Half a world away, and yet exactly the same. Throughout the late 1960s and into the early 70s, one chilling pattern began to emerge. Each time the Grinning Man appeared, there were other things nearby, strange lights in the sky, objects moving on their own, shadowy figures, and always that smile. In West Virginia, the Grinning Man encounter with Woodrow Derenberger happened just 2 weeks before the first Mothman sighting in Point Pleasant. And while some dismissed this as coincidence, others believed the two were linked. One theory, that Indrid Cold wasn't alone, that he was one of several entities sent to observe or interfere with humanity, either as a precursor to greater events or as part of some unknown agenda. Derenberger didn't just meet Indrid Cold once. He claimed the being returned many times, sometimes accompanied by two other grinning figures, Demo Hassan and Carl Ardo. Even his wife said she met them, and she wasn't the only one. In Italy, in December of 1979, a man named Piers Anfretta reported being abducted by reptilian aliens. But before the abduction began, he was contacted by a being, bald, tall, wearing a suit, and grinning. The being called himself Indrid Cold. It didn't stop there. Abductees around the world, from Argentina to Russia, began describing clicking sounds, paralysis, floating, and grinning men watching them from the shadows. Even Men in Black reports, often tied to UFO sightings, described agents who were too strange to be human, smiles too wide, eyes too far apart, movements too smooth, and voices that felt wrong. What if they weren't agents at all? What if they were something else in disguise? Some fringe theorists even argue that Mothman, Indrid Cold, and the Grinning Man are the same being, or at least the same species. A race of shapeshifters, capable of appearing in multiple forms, watching humanity from the edges of perception. They walk among us, pose as humans, smile as if they understand emotion. But behind that smile is something alien, something ancient, and something that does not belong here. But here's the real question. If they're watching us, what are they waiting for? By now, we've followed the Grinning Man through decades of eerie encounters. From New Jersey to West Virginia, from the United States to the Scottish Highlands. And each time his appearance is the same. Tall, hairless, wearing a tight reflective suit, and always smiling. But what are we really dealing with here? If we take a step back and look critically, the earliest reports, the first three in fact, were all documented by one man, John Keel, the journalist and author of the Mothman prophecies. He was the first to connect these dots, the first to give the being a name, the first to imply something extraterrestrial. And while his writing is gripping, it's important to ask, was he uncovering a hidden truth, or was he crafting a modern myth? Some say Keel used literary liberties, that he sensationalized the accounts, that later reports were copycats, influenced by his books and media. They argue the Grinning Man is nothing more than an evolving urban legend, fueled by fear, media, and cultural imagination. But there's a problem with that explanation. Why do so many eyewitnesses from different countries in decades describe the same exact figure? Why the consistent details? The grin, the suit, the paralysis, the clicking sounds, all aligning before the internet existed. And then there's the seasonal pattern. Many of these sightings occur between winter and spring, cold, isolated, silent nights when the world is asleep, almost as if that's when he walks among us. So who is he? A cosmic observer? A cruel trickster? A being caught between dimensions? Or just the human psyche, projecting our deepest fears onto the shadows? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. The Grinning Man has made his mark on stories, on towns, on people who never quite slept the same again. And the next time you hear clicking at night, the next time you wake up and feel like someone is standing in your room, don't open your eyes too fast, because he might be there, still grinning,